Hello everybody, welcome to the patch 13.1b rundown for amateur play. My name is Quinn, and today I'll be using a system of predictive criteria that I've been developing to help me assess the probable impact of the patch at all levels of amateur competition. Although, do note that I'm not super sensitive to the impact of tiny changes at around Masters Plus level just now, so technically the target audience is more so Diamond under amateur competition. Okay. Please keep in mind as we're going through the changes that although each change will have an impact on raw solo queue win rate, the vast majority of small changes to individual champions should make virtually no difference to most players in IBS Gold and Platinum, since we should be drafting around comfort anyway. If you're watching this roughly a week after release, make sure to check the comments section for any updates to my predictions, because sometimes small details are overlooked, so please don't take my opinions as gospel. Use them to guide your own strategic changes from patch to patch. We've got kind of an exciting patch today. It's called patch 13.1b instead of patch 13.2 because of the recent cybersecurity attack, meaning that they have to deploy it as a hotfix. But at the end of the day, there is no difference between this and a conventional patch, except for how it is presented, right? So, this released sometime yesterday in the afternoon. I've skimmed over it a couple of times and kind of just slept on it to kind of really solidify my opinions, right? What's up? Yeah, the cat. That's the one. Everybody sent me the Yumi changes. Everybody, right? Literally everybody sent me those Yumi changes. It's pretty extreme for Yumi, right? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, we're going to start with the champion changes, but at the same time, the champion changes don't necessarily feel like the best place to start, because there will be a number of champions that are getting more impacted by systemic changes later on. You'll see what I mean shortly. We'll start with Gangplank, right? With the ADC changes coming this patch, wink wink, right? There's something affecting Gangplank later. They are just trying to reduce his power overall. So, minus 5% bonus damage on crits on E. Remember, this is the bit of damage that is applied last during Gangplank's calculations. The barrels will amplify the damage of whatever triggered them, which can crit, and then if it crits, that damage is then increased by a further 5%. On top of that, Gangplank's losing some AD growth. Okay, so ordinarily, I look at Gangplank and it's okay, is this... You can classify this as a burst champion very easily, but he's also got very good sustained damage, and so, that means small amounts of damage shouldn't be affecting him. But more importantly than that, Gangplank just overkills. And so any instance of damage reduction cannot be viewed too harshly, right? We'll put a pin in him until we see the AD carry changes, and then we can kind of come back. But just immediately when you see this on a champion that does so much damage already, and he doesn't even have to just kill you with one spell, to actually get his value, you're definitely not anticipating, any significant change in priority, really at any level. If you can play Gangplank, you can still play Gangplank, Heimerdinger. So, Heimerdinger support has been kind of taking over the game since Worlds, right? Why is he taking over the game? Well, one of the reasons is his turrets they feel very oppressive in the bot lane. And the counter picks that he has are not orthodox champions. They're not things that people really have a lot of experience playing. And especially when you're playing at Platinum level, where melee supports are really good at driving the game forwards above all, Heimerdinger is very good at stifling that. So he is a power pick. He's a power pick at virtually all ranks. In IBS, where everyone's pro fighting, in Platinum, where everyone's susceptible to his counter engage because he's also an offensive champion in support role. So what does he do? His turrets have lost freaking mental math on the spot. 30 to 45 HP at level 1. Which is substantial, right? This isn't quite getting them in range where a Karma Q can kill, so it's not opening that particular new counter pick, right? But I'm thinking the artillery mage answers can just deal with the turrets even more easily without even committing an auto attack now. The Ashe answer should be much more effective, right? She'll take less retaliation damage while clearing out a turret. Like, this is absolutely like a noticeable amount of HP loss. In the early game, like, so the reason I'm saying this, in the early game, the burst champions, whenever you see a swing of about 40 damage, that is really significant in the lane phase for their power level. Like, it's actually one of the big changes that caused Zed to lose like 3% win rate in solo queue a few patches ago. He lost like 35, 40 damage, something along those lines, and like actually lost kill windows for it, right? And he was already not a super compelling competitive pick given stopwatch vulnerability, at high levels at least. So that same principle of like this damage threshold does get transferred to durability very effectively. And so if Heimer's turrets are falling in HP by that exact value, we are expecting him to be less oppressive. Now, this bit right here, right? What's happening here? Minus 10 initial magic damage at all ranks. We do, I was about to say not a very big deal, but then I remembered, it's like, okay, yes, we do now have to realize that this is technically a poke champion losing damage on their poke spell, and that's more impactful than a DPS champion losing damage on their DPS spell. Plus 10% AP, minus 10 base damage. Ultimately, like, even on Rylai's Rush, that should mean, like... Yeah, because that's, like... What's Rylai's? Like, 90 AP? So you're only losing 1 damage once your Rylai's is complete. It's an early game lane phase nerf. Yeah, and that's ultimately all she wrote about the W nerf. You wondered about the base damage nerfs, but amping AV ratio, and then you were reminded of, yeah, Heimer support is by far the most dominant position for him, right? And I should also, like, mention, Heimer top is still, like, okay. Heimer 80 carry is probably underrated right now, just given how good Heimer support is. What does this do for our amateur players? I'm just trying to envision if this actually changes pick conditions for him at all. Like, because we do, the predictors say we do have to take this nerf very seriously, right? At least until the mid game, but like, okay, I think the best way we can draw a conclusion is through that Karma example I brought up. Does this actually give, like, Karma the means to kill a turret with just Q? No. Does it give her the means to kill turret with Q auto, where before it would have to be like Q auto, and she's probably taking too much damage and spending her shield, and it's a very high investment. I mean, because the Q is like, what, 70 early game? Let's actually find out right away. Yeah, I don't know. Very quickly, this is getting close, right? Depends on how fast it scales on Heimer turrets. I think we'll have to kind of wait and see. Ultimately, this means the picks that are good into Heimerdinger will be better into Heimerdinger. Maybe a few more counter picks open up, like other long-range champions that just become more capable of clearing out his turrets. If that is the case, then I think Heimerdinger will be a little bit devalued as a blind pick. Although he retains his ability to make picks and catches, and so he doesn't get completely devalued in, like, Platinum especially. He absolutely still dumpsters melee champions, and there's very little they can do about that, right? Yeah, my prediction is that we actually probably have to revise our pick conditions for Heimerdinger just a little bit, and it should feel easier to find appropriate counter picks within pools, although champion pool limitations throughout the amateur ecosystem will probably still result in Heimerdinger being a very big problem for a lot of teams, right? It is. It's very high. It's kind of silly, right? Okay, Kassadin. Good lord, this champion is broken. This champion is absolutely broken. So, he's broken off a combination of his recent changes that allowed his Force Pulse to kind of go ballistic, as well as Rod of Ages becoming an actually good item, as well as Seraph's Embrace being reverted, and it's just the perfect storm of Kassadin meta, right? Although, he's still... On my team, we still don't think he's, like, fully blind pickable. He's not that broken. He's just broken if you use him correctly, right? But be careful, because this is not 4 seconds late. This is not plus 4 seconds late. This is a deceptive change. So, champions with cooldown refreshes are affected differently by cooldown changes, right? What does Kassadin get? Kassadin. At each time Kassadin or a nearby champion casts an ally, Force Pulse's current cooldown is reduced by 1 second. Now, this isn't as extreme as, like, what Ezreal gets, where he's in full control of his own cooldown, and so that ultimate buff he got a while ago in Season 12 actually went insane. Like, it was way more valuable than it looked, given, like, these cooldown refresh mechanics, right? So it's deceptive. It's not exactly plus 4. It is kind of exactly plus 4. Like, the end result of this is that in chaotic mid-game, late-game team fights, like, you only need to see, like, +1, +2 spell casts to, like, gain your same opportunity back. It's basically just trying to slow down Kassadin's onslaughts, like, between 11 to 16, really, because, like, let's be real, he does not need the Force Pulse post 16. Although he started maxing this first, no? Give me a sec. Yeah, he did. He did start maxing this first. Hi, Ben. Okay, so I might have gotten ahead of myself a little bit. I said, like, wow, guys, champions with cooldown refreshes are affected differently. And, like, they still are, but Kassadin's is a very direct, like, 1 spell equals 1 second, and it's not necessarily his spells, it's enemy spells, so he doesn't have as much control over it as my Ezreal example. Actually... Okay, will 4 second E cooldown on, remember, his new first max actually affect Kassadin at lower ranks? No! The problem with, like, lower ranks is that Kassadin gets to scale. We're not good at punishing him. Platinum cannot punish him very well unless, like, they're running their full cross-map, like, giga aggro comps. Those are the conditions in which Kassadin loses in Platinum. Those aren't changing. In IBS, if Kassadin's not against, like, a direct lane bully, which he often is, the fights are messy enough that he's always given a comeback opportunity, right? In 1v1s or something, you could see him feeling it a bit. Sure, like, in the early game when he's trying to scale, he gets a little less agency. But, like, the point is, Kassadin is so systemically supported that he doesn't necessarily need the early combat power. This, because he's a champion with cooldown refreshes, won't affect him very much later. And then, like, the slightly increased period of weakness doesn't matter for, like, a lot of lower levels in amateur play. Like, at the end of the day, this kind of looks like it's one of those nerfs that's, like, from tier 0 to tier 1 sort of thing. Kassadin just has too much going for him for, like, a slightly weaker dual potential before he's fully online to really matter, in my opinion. Yeah, and they even said we're bringing his power down a tad, right? A tad, just a little bit, just a small smidgen, right? And you can obviously offset this by drafting Kassadin with champions that have like very short cooldowns and stuff, right? I don't know, so maybe I'm not like super high confidence on that statement, but because like I kind of started in one direction, realized I was a bit inaccurate on that one, and then settled on this, but yeah, I still wouldn't be bewildered if this was super low impact overall, right? Okay, Kindred. We have an easy predictor for this one, right? Guys, this is a DPS champion. Is this Kindred's primary damage ability? No, not even. It's Kindred's primary clear ability, right? The only time where like minus 10 damage overall on Q matters is when you're clearing your jungle. But we've established through our levels of play study that like the clear speed is only a relevant factor in Diamond Plus, right? So Kindred pick conditions don't change whatsoever. Kindred power should not change really whatsoever. It's more so that Kindred early game is a little bit slower, which opens up potentially a few new invades, which will not be capitalized on in like Platinum below. It might be capitalized on in Diamond up. Kindred is still like top 1 jungler in the game, so expected very minimal impact, and the people for whom this does impact are good enough at the game to path around the potential weakness that like this will offer, but like realistically it's negligible, right? Lilia. Okay, so yeah, this is interesting. They're increasing all of Lilia's AP ratios. The reason they're doing this is if you've looked up any of Lilia's stats lately, she has one viable build. It's Demonic Tank. Lilia feels very incapable of actually benefiting from an AP build right now, which, you know, I guess makes sense. She is supposed to be kind of a util bruiser. It kind of makes sense for her to have leaned into that identity a bit, but yeah. So what are they doing? Plus 10% ratio overall on Q, plus 15% ratio on E, minus 2 seconds on E. So I'm just gonna say this: if you buy a Liandry's, this is plus 8 damage per Q. That is the kind of DPS change that like it's ultimately making almost no difference, right? And then this would be on that Liandry spike, plus 12, right? Yeah, plus 12 on E. So what's that? Plus 20 damage in like one rotation. And, you know, then so she's getting something, right? She's getting something. This is the one part that's like probably going to make the most impact. Plus 3% max health, or plus 0.3% max health per 100 AP of target's maximum health. These types of changes, these percent max health, like per 100 AP changes, I am so bad at assessing them because like basically there's just a small hole in my predictors where it's like I know how to identify when a DPS change is negligible, but I'm lacking a bit of identification for when a DPS change is like actually power and pick condition impacting. Just kind of spoiling the demonic changes coming up. I don't think they looked very severe, but then that's also hitting like that same lack of a predictor for percent max health damage as DPS, like a dot or stuff like that. Her scaling on her passive has increased by 25% with that change. That's a very dangerous way to look at it. You don't just look at numbers changes and say, wow, this went up by 25%. Because, like, what does that actually tell you? Does that, like, okay, I shouldn't be so immediately critical of that idea. I really shouldn't, because, like, it might actually be helpful. The scaling... Oh, yeah, but that's the scaling on her passive, not, like, the actual overall DPS, right? So, like, you look at that, and that's kind of representing it as, like, wow, that's a humongous increase. When in context, it is a lot less extreme than that. So Alex, I think you're on the right track of, like, how to assess a change like that, but, like, it's contextualized dangerously. It's contextualized dangerously. We know how much damage her passive tends to do. Problem is maybe not knowing the average. Oh, we absolutely know, because she's expected to have, like... We can make a comparison between, like, current demonic and, like, next patch demonic or next patch Leandries, right? Let's actually do a direct demonic comparison then. Whoops. So Lilia is expected... What's her current build? It's demonic into full tank. Or, like, demonic Rylai's into full tank is an option too, but... Or, like, demonic Jackshow Rylai's. She's still sticking with, like, the durability, but, like, Lilia is not performing great. That's the problem. Like, Lilia's not doing very well. So Lilia typically gets like 75 AP from the raw demonic embrace. You know, plus 350 HP, so it's getting, I mean, how much is it giving itself? It usually tells me right here, right? $75 plus 350 times 0.02. Okay, she's getting 82. So she's getting... So it doesn't really matter whether she's building Leandries or Demonic first. I mean, Rylai's would increase it by like 10, but... she's gaining roughly 82 AP from her first item. So let's actually find the more correct formula. Per 100 AP. Ah, come on, give me a real number. Give me a real number. 1.2%, so that'd be 0.012 per 100 AP, which would be 0.00012? Yeah, so if she's got 89, sorry, if she got 82 AP. Sorry, I should actually. Yeah, she's got 89 AP. She's receiving like on live not quite 0.1% max health damage, and it's going up to 1.23% max health damage per second. And this persists for 3 seconds. So hold on, it's like... So on live, it's... I almost started using my numpad and changing my scenes. .984, and then post buff, it would be 1.23% max HP per second. Just on first item. Okay, so you know what? Like... And then it lasts for 3 seconds, right? So that's going to 3.69%. And this 0.984 was like 2.952%. So, you know, over the course of her entire passive, assuming it's not being reapplied, that's like plus 1% max health damage per second. Which actually is kind of a lot. That actually is kind of a lot. Hi, Jackie. It's good to see you. Okay, so while this Q change is kind of negligible on its own, because on like the Liandry spike it's plus 8 damage per Q. I guess that does add up over time. Her Q damage is going up substantially. E chunk is like becoming a little more threatening. Top conditions are into tanks. That's true. Answering Heartsteel. That is true, but don't forget. Okay, so I mean, then I guess we have to factor that in. Top lane Lilia likes playing into tanks. Those are her core pick conditions. Although tank itemization is kind of poor for laning tanks. But at the same time, most elos, people don't really care and will pick their tanks anyway, which can still open Lilia pick conditions. I think she does kind of warp the game a little bit in mid-elos like Platinum and stuff, where she kind of forces her team to play around her a little differently, and it's a little odd. So this increases clear speed too as time goes on, don't forget. So is Lilia struggling to keep up with the pace of her own jungle in Season 13? Because that's a change that I didn't actually spend the time reflecting on. Ultimately, for most players, this probably is most likely to open some extra Lilia top lane angles. The increased income is going to take most advantage of these ratio buffs. The actually meaningful DPS increase is going to hurt her best tank matchups the most. I can't say for certain if for the average player, jungle Lilia becomes like actually any better. Do I think this is enough to create some actual AP builds? I mean, maybe we're more likely to go like demonic Rylai's or something. I can't see us pivoting immediately hard into Liandry's. Yeah. Either way, if my predictor on this one isn't very refined, but at the very least, like, we have some way of checking things out, you know? So yeah, that's probably it. We would probably expect, like, marginal changes in jungle power, but greater changes in top lane power. And remember, this champ is not a very good solo queue champ anyway, so... Oh, this is annoying, though. This is annoying. No, you know what? Platinum players die to this. A lot, so. Are we good to move on from this one? Is anyone else seeing the Runeterra deck tracker extension? Why am I seeing it? Okay, my end is just bugged, I guess. I'm like, why is this visible on my League of Legends stream? Am I in the wrong category? Oh, I don't know. I feel unsatisfied saying that Lilia jungle pick conditions don't become easier, or that, like, Lilia player... No, you know what? That's the thing that I'm missing. Lilia players are just going to feel a lot happier about their champion. They're probably just going to feel that their champion is, like, a lot more playable. Like... I'm waffling here. I'm really waffling. It's like, this looks substantial and meaningful to a degree. Like, not this one, but kind of this, nah. We really just have to view this as, this increases all damage and clear speed, and so this is, like, the buff that matters the most. This one really kills, like, weaker players a lot more often. You can fish for it, and it's actually higher threat and higher pressure. Yeah, so if there's only, like, one really significant buff, and it's, like, and then, like, a somewhat significant buff, and then kind of, like, an, it's okay DPS buff that we would usually rate very lowly on its own, then we should probably expect that some of these changes are offset by the demonic nerfs, and that, yeah, I'm probably accurate about my assessment of jungle Lilia not becoming, like, too much more pronounced, unless you're at, like, Diamond Plus, where this clear speed change matters a lot, and where her utility is better utilized. And we're probably correct in saying that top lane Lilia is, like, top lane Lilia with the increased income is, like, the real winner, right? Okay, I'm satisfied. I talked myself into being confident. Lucian! Lucian and Nami are overtaking the pro scene, which means we need to address them. Lucian, as is, doesn't fare too well in the hands of non-elite players. We're reducing his lane bullying potential. You really hit me with a mana change, huh? This is all mana! I have no good predictors for this. Ugh. Okay. Piercing Light costs an awkward 48, scaling up to 80, so that actually does become kind of limiting as time goes on. Ardent's Blaze costs 60 flats. Relentless Pursuit costs 40, scaling down to 0. Don't forget that W is his opener. That is true, and that is the slightly more expensive one. And the culling costs 100. Okay, so I've been getting into arguments with people on TikTok lately about how much mana is necessary to play out a sequence. So even though we don't have predictors, we can use the knowledge that we have to kind of try to figure out how this would impact Lucian. You only need enough mana to play out your sequence. What does that mean exactly? A sequence is the period between recalls. A positive sequence is you exit base, you play out your lane or your mid game, you achieve some form of tangible advantage, you recall. That's a good sequence, right? Mana is only constraining if you would run before your sequence would be completed, right? So Lucian losing 30 mana at level 1 immediately being offsets by some growth. This locks him out of half of a W. This locks him out of just over half a Q. So he would lose like 1 Q, 1 W. Right? The growth catches up at level 6. No, because this is not linear. That's the problem with growth statistics in League of Legends. They are not linear. This is not +3 mana per level. This is just... What ends up happening is that you gain more of your growth statistic later into the game. That's actually why late levels are so important, and why mid-game solo laners feel so overwhelming for mid-game AD carries. Because a champion who's left level 13 versus a champion that is level 10, that level 13 champion is literally gaining more stats per level than the level 10 champion, even. It's not just the level gap, it's the level gap compounded with getting more of your growth from previous levels because you're a higher level, don't even know what that... Yeah, I mean, the formula... Look, I could even show you the formulas, right? The formulas are right here. The, where is it? One of these is growth. I can't remember which one. Yeah. I think this is growth. Yeah, so it's taking my base stats. This is armor growth, and the formula is the same for every stat, right? It doesn't change based on stat. It is your base value plus your growth value times level -1 times these static coefficients, right? This is the growth formula. So you gain more value per level right? Oops. What is C? C was my, C is armor growth in this case. Or sorry, yeah. So I get, base resistance. Oh, sorry, is this HP? Is this HP? This is HP. It must be, no? Yeah, B is my base HP, C is my HP per level. That's a growth statistic, and so the growth statistic is affected by all this. Because why must we have easy things, right? So Lucian is actually losing one of his spell casts per lane phase. Technically, not even really factoring in the, okay, -1 MP5. I would expect that to be kind of low value. Lucian regularly recalls, right when he's no? I don't think this matters. No, I don't think this... I think this has a chance to matter. But who does it matter for is the question. This obviously matters if it's locking Lucian out of half of a spellcast, but who does it matter for? Does it matter only for the elite players? Or does it actually disproportionately affect lower level players who are poorer at managing their resources and are fighting more often without generating positive sequence endings off of their, like, trades, right? So if Nami and Lucian get enough... Well, we're going to see that Nami's nerfs are actually bigger than they look. We're about to see that. I'm right now just trying to assess what happens when, like, an IBS or gold player picks Lucian because they like Lucian and they know how to play Lucian and they don't necessarily have Nami. They might have Lulu, or I was going to say Yumi, but they don't have a Yumi anymore. To my knowledge, no. No, they don't. I think this probably makes Lucian's early sequencing a little more awkward. We will put him on the watch list, is my conclusion. Instead of trying to just outright predict what will happen to Lucian, we will put him on the watch list with the expectation that this might actually make it way, way harder for the average player to play out an early game sequence on Lucian, especially since so much of his power, plus Lucian Nami's power, is being shifted towards the mid game and has been over the last few seasons. I just don't have a lot of faith that, like, Lucian is going to feel amazing in lane phase, even for the Lucian players. If this hurts, Lucian could start going Doran's Ring again. Actually kind of true. Actually kind of true. No, if we're actually playing for the mid game a little more now. Huh. And you just play Lucian to... you just play Lucian to kind of, like, stall through his, like, really... kind of looking at raw damage for the trades. Yeah, and it's a little underwhelming in the very early game, right? Aphelios Lulu is an answer to Lucian Nami nowadays because they are not completely overwhelming in lane phase. Because Lulu does have the chance to get her shield power up. Because Aphelios does get the power to, like, hit the damage he needs for Severum to be a really good answer. Excuse me, but... yeah, so we just have to put him on the watch list. Like, does Doran's Ring start actually offset this, and is it okay for him to lane like that? Does Lucian's damage provide him with enough, like, means to threaten the opponent and generate his positive sequences anyway? Does any of this even matter in IBS GP, like, at all? In Platinum, probably. At least a little bit, because people are better at laning than they are before. They still make mistakes, but, like, it's a mana change. It's usually just a farm phase till first recall. Usually true, yeah. Because they really nerfed him in the lane phase. Yeah, I need to develop some mana predictors. I need to develop some better mana predictors. Like, I just... Ultimately, yeah, here's what I'll say. He may be on the watch list, but ultimately, if this doesn't... He may be on the watch list, but ultimately, if he is still continuously playing out his lane phase for, like, low impact and just taking, like, safe trades and scaling into the mid-game where he actually bursts, then this alone doesn't change him very much. It's really more so the changes to Nami that would affect him then, in that case. And it's also depending on, like, whether Lucian ends up still bound to Presence of Mind while everyone else gets to opt out of it and go overheal, and answer him more effectively. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll kind of keep an eye out for how Lucian is impacted by these changes, right? It would definitely feel kind of bad if he was forced back into Essence Reaver to offset this. He probably isn't... I mean, what's he doing anyway? Like... No, because by the time... Because he would probably be on, like... Yeah, but I think the ER buffs are, like, negligible in the context of this greater system. Unless the game is, like, noticeably squishy, I struggle to see how plus 10 AD compared to all of the rest of the options, like, actually makes that more appealing. Okay, I need to say something that I can edit down into the short form video. So I need to, like, yeah. Yeah, look, we've spent way too long talking about Lucian, like, going back and forth, bringing up stuff. It's like, oh, how do I assess a mana buff? Like, how do we do this? Originally, I thought, like, maybe this actually impacts his ability to play out an early game sequence, but then it's also brought up that, like, okay, yeah, he can opt into Doran's Ring again. He can opt into, like, or he can just, like, play out, like, slower lane phases as he has been doing lately, play for the mid game where he actually spikes. Like, maybe this doesn't actually change his capacity to lane whatsoever, even though it's half of any random basic ability. Ultimately, there's so much at play in the system here, like AD carry changes, meaning people might be going overheal more often, where Lucian might be bound to Presence of Mind, while overheal also impacts him negatively. There's also the possibility of going Quick Blade's second item, which just might make him, like, really strong again, right? Like, there's so much at play here that this is not an isolated change, and so there's no point in, like, talking about just this. There is literally no way to predict the impact of this change in the context of all of that. We have to get practical experience and see, like, Lucian will lose pick conditions if the Nami buffs are dramatic, the systems stop favoring him as much, and, like, he actually loses... He actually, finds himself awkwardly playing out some sequences. But, like, I'm not able to predict that. This is, like, the probably #1 thing we're going to have to test on the patch to actually draw a conclusion. I mean, if he is still just farming, like, predominantly with auto attacks and not really trading until he has, like, his big spikes, this is an absolutely nothing nerf. But it has potential to hit him. So, it, like... Hate that. By the way, guys, I noticed lately, whenever I mention that I'm recording for a video, you guys go silent. I do not care if Twitch chat appears in my video. That's totally fine by me. You don't have to go silent. So. If I cared, then I would turn it off. Because then I can control it, right? You always assume do what? Yeah, well, technically I'm making a stream highlight, you know? Like, technically that's what I'm doing, so. I can see why you would assume that, because I'm very, like, particular, but... Okay, on to Maokai. Maokai is getting a partial revert of his Q bonus damage to monsters. And Maokai is also, what's he losing here? 1% bonus HP and 5% AP on Sapling Toss. Going, like, on the Empowered one, it's 2% bonus, 10%. So it's, yeah, it's just... Because this is double the damage, right? Yeah, it's nowadays double the damage. Gotcha. And yeah, I could record separately if I want to clean. I don't have to stream and share it with you. Okay, so let's be clear. Maokai is, like, absolutely fucking broken, right? And the coolest part about him is, like, he's arguably more broken at lower ranks. Do you guys remember that period in which it was like Worlds 2022? Maokai was, like, really prominent going into the tournament and then just abruptly fell off and disappeared. Well, he was still absolutely terrorizing amateur play during that time, even though the Worlds players had kind of moved on from him and decided that he wasn't quite as strong as we thought at that period. Maokai, in current state, just regularly dumpsters lower elos a lot more consistently. I mean, he is just so stable, so consistent, so flexible. You can fit him into virtually any archetype because he can be your primary peel. He can poke, like, he can be in siege comps. He, as the siege or the disengage, right? He can be in any team fight. He can be in, like, a lot of controls because he's so defensive. He can get, like, he can find flanks. This champion has so many options. And that flexibility to take fights in a bunch of different ways is really valuable at levels of play where people are making a lot more mistakes. So what do we see? We see a clear speed nerf, which we know negligibly affects Platinum and below, right? It only affects Platinum and below if, like, it makes a champion glacially slow, and then it actually impacts your ability to get resources. Maokai, I suppose, like, had windows where he was, like, kind of close to that, but he was definitely offsetting it by purchasing early Lucidity Boots or purchasing early Dark Seal, like Blasting Wand for the Demonic Embrace and stuff. The only time where you would actually, like, experience some clear speed issues is if you just went, like, straight Radiant Rush, right? So this is 20 damage per Q to monsters away at all ranks. Let's point out what buffs Maokai received lately to kind of put him in this state in the first place. Maokai's bonus monster damage increased from 80 to 160 up to 120 to 200, right? This is having that buff. This is a half revert of that buff. Maokai, you have to remember, also got the base damage on top of that, and that was a big factor. He also got some of his sap magic heal back, right? Maokai is not getting a super significant rollback in this Q power. We just have to look at this. Okay. Saplings are probably the really oppressive part about him right now in, like, demonic builds. Demonic, like, Leandries has been stomping solo Q. People have been going Red Smite on Maokai. Like, if somebody's building Red Smite, that's an unusual circumstance, all right? So, but ultimately, like, let's see what we have. We have a clear speed change, which a lot of levels of play do not care about. And we have, like, what is effectively a small poke damage nerf. Now, poke damage impacts champions at small values. Yes, it really does. So it is a little, so although we were able to say it looks like a small damage change, and it would be if he was pure DPS, it does matter a little bit in terms of, like, the traps. The traps become less oppressive. But, like, do most variants of Maokai need to rely fully on those traps, or is the chip damage just kind of a bonus to his output? It's a bonus. So ultimately, I would predict, you know, with how absolutely giga broken he was before, Platinum and below, this should make a negligible difference for the Maokai players. Really, the Demonic Embrace change would be more likely to impact his power, and then even if it does, you can still Lucidity Boot Rush into Radiant Virtue and, like, be fine in a different role. Like, the champion is flexible enough that you just can change what you're doing and adapt if you are a Maokai player. If you're a Maokai abuser and you only want to play Maokai because he's broken, maybe you don't list him as highly in the list of priorities, but again, he's kind of like along the lines of Seraphine, like these utility champions that just really regularly stomp IBS Platinum, like levels like that. So I'm not expecting a lot of change. Nami. What did Nami get? Nami got -5 damage all ranks E, -10 damage W. Okay, that sounds negligible, but we are going to look at Nami under the lens of a burst champion. Remember, this hits 3 times. This is -15 damage. This is -10, right? That is a difference of 25 damage. We're not really factoring in the AP ratio. Mandate is only 40 AP. Nami's not getting much more than that, unless she builds a Dark Seal. It's, right? Which she probably should be doing, but I digress. We have a difference of 25 damage. Now, usually on a burst champion, like our general criteria is like, if it's 35-40, we start to really say, wow, that's a big difference. I don't think the Nami Lucian lanes are like giga overkilling everybody unless it's specifically a culling kill. So we actually do get a little bit concerned about Nami's damage output, especially since she is predominantly a damage champion. This Nami change is going to be a test to see if our predictors have the right values, because 25 is under our value for the early to mid game, where like we think it's valuable. We think it's like impactful, but it's still likely to be impactful. That said, if you are picking Nami because like Janna's not in pool, because Lulu's not in pool, because you actually value her disengage and stuff like that, and you're not picking her as like the raw lane bully that she's like kind of designed to be, you are picking her for her defensive utility and you're good at that part of Nami. Like if you were picking Nami without the context of Lucian in your games, she's going to be completely fine. There's going to be like virtually no relevant change for you. It's only the Nami Lucian players where I look at that and I say, like, that's actually meaningful burst, and they're not overkilling. So, we'll see how this plays out. Could be very high impact at all levels. Orianna. So, one of my teammates asked me the other day, it's like, well, why would we ever pick Orianna in like mid-level platinum when Victor exists, right? Because remember, Victor just gets unusually dominant in platinum where games get messy. The reason is like ball delivery, just synergy picks to make her a lot more reliable. Let's see what they're actually doing. So, Clockwork Windup. It is now a level... the damage is unchanged, but it now scales from levels 1 to 18. Now, the funny thing about this is this kind of looks like it marginally decreases in power at certain levels. Right? 147? Well, because it now scales to level 18, so, like, there's going to be a period at, like, 16 where you're actually weaker, no? Like, that's probably, like, so negligible we don't even need to talk about it, but it's just kind of funny to notice. The ball deals 100% damage to the first target hit, and damage afterwards is reduced by 10% per enemy hit. It's now just 70% all enemies hit after the first. So this means the literal second and third target are actually taking less damage, but everyone after that is taking more. Technically, that is like a wave clear buff. That's like doing virtually nothing in a team fight. But to my knowledge, her wave clear was already kind of fine, no? Dissonance is going down by 20 mana at rank 5. Actually kind of a big deal because this is so absurdly overpriced, right? And Shockwave base damage is going up by 50, 75, 100, plus 10% AP. That one's actually kind of big in terms of like raw damage output, especially in a game state in which like genuine burst mages are like a little unhappy against their direct counterparts because Lifeline is running rampant in the game. Now, this is going to sound stupid, but when I look at these changes, I genuinely think Orianna support buffs immediately, more so than like Orianna mid buffs. I look at this and I think like, wow, one of the big limiting factors to Orianna's utility was just how expensive this was and how difficult it was to play out a sequence. And now we're getting extra base damage and like we're doing more damage with less AP too. Like utility is more impactful. Like, wow, that's... So Enchanter Orianna is like kind of a funny niche thing that I think has been pretty weak for a while, but like I might re-explore it after this change. Maybe not for competitive viability, although I think there's more to it than people think, given the resistances on E as well. But that's not like the most important thing to talk about. Truthfully, guys, I'm not anticipating like a big difference. No, the only thing that would like create more pick conditions for Orianna and make her like significantly more appealing is if this hits like extra wave clear breakpoints. Now, I do want to point out that like in the best possible conditions for her, this makes her a better pick like for her bald carriers, because it's just, well, if you have a ball carrier, now it's like cheaper to speed them up. Now it's higher it's higher impact once they actually get in. I genuinely think Orianna's in like a fine state in coordinated play. You probably still don't want to value her super highly in IBS for her synergy points. It's only if you happen to be like an Orianna player. But if you're an Orianna player, you're not picking her more or less because she got small changes. It's definitely good. It's definitely good. If nothing else, this is a burst champion who just received 50 damage at rank 1, actually. No, that's big. That's really, really, really big. Orianna at level 6 just received 50 damage. And that is definitely within our bounds of, like, reacting to burst champions receiving damage. Like that's definitely within the, threshold of a change being significant for burst champions. Those are the words I was fishing for. Right. So, basically, TLDR, kind of funny, very low impact. Might unlock some more wave clear breakpoints, potentially, and that could be power impacting, like really power impacting in P+. This is an Orianna support buff. This, you would kind of look at it from the context at first of saying, like, oh, is that... Like, that's kind of nice, we just get some more damage. And then you, like, really zero in on the rank 1 plus 50 and think, oh, that's actually a really, really, really big deal for early game lethal windows. So yeah, Orianna probably does become... Orianna is like one of those mages that, like, so many players have in their back pocket. I probably wouldn't say, like, if you don't have Orianna in pool, don't go out of your way to learn her. It's probably not worth the time, like, when you probably have, like... You don't want to, like, build your pool out too deep in lower level amateur. But if you have an Orianna in your back pocket, that's big. That's really big. Okay. Rise. With 13 ones, yeah, whatever. So Rise loses some durability and loses some maximum mana. Okay. Let's check the durability first. We have to tailor this to Rise now. The plan works too well. Okay, hold on. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this over here. Twitch chat, I'm not going to be able to see you for a moment. Actually, I'll put this one over here so you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm not going to see you guys for a moment. Rise has 645 base health. And that is not changing. Rise has 124 HP per level, and that is not changing. Rise's base magic resistance is 36, and that is changing to 32. However, his magic resist per level, which is 1.3, is not changing. Okay, so here is how Rise's durability changes throughout the game. Rise at level 1 is losing, what, 25 durability. So this actually plays into the Nami thing too. We have decided that 25 might be actually a significant number for early game, but it's like it's lower than our current threshold. My threshold right now is like 40. 40 damage is significant in the early game. So Rise losing like less than 40 effective HP, if it ends up mattering, I don't think it necessarily should, but it could. If it ends up mattering, that means our criteria on that predictor is too strict. If you go all the way up to level 18, Rise is losing like 130 effective HP. At level 11, where it's like more likely to come into play, what is that, 70? Yeah, that's 70 effective HP. Does 70 effective HP matter too much on a ROAS Seraph's user? Well, Lyssandra's 75 didn't very much. So ultimately, we're going to kind of look at that and say, like, it matters like a little bit, but not enough to change pick conditions, right? It matters in the case that Rise is getting pelted with magic damage and can't fight back because he's range limited and is in a position where he can't just flash EW and set up his jungler and stuff like that. Now, as for this, increased maximum mana. Rise is losing 4% mana per 100 AP. How do we judge the impact of that? Because it's another mana change, and so this requires prior knowledge, no? Matters. It would matter if it prevents him from playing out a sequence, right? It would matter a lot if it limits his sequences. That's how mana nerfs matter. It would matter in the mid to late game. Eternity is not refunding as much mana as it used to. Seraph's lifeline is consuming. Oh! I wonder if this actually hits a recursive point on Seraphs. If this hits a recursive point on Seraphs, it's actually indirectly nerfing his AP as well. Right? I think it actually does hit an interaction like that, so Rise's overall DPS also goes down by quite a bit. It is hitting Rise's size of a lifeline shield. It is hitting his durability further. So what we actually identify here is indirectly a double dip into durability nerfs. And that's actually kind of a big deal for a short-range battle mage like this. Now, Rise actually might be overrated in Platinum a little bit and should not be picked in IBS. Like, don't assume you know what you're doing in, like, IBS Rise unless you're, like, literally, like, just running up to people, like, hitting your keys and somehow killing them. Because, like, his game plan is fundamentally macro-based, and that's not what we favor in that level of play. This actually might be a double dip nerf on durability that, like, impacts his ability to do all the things he likes to do, while also potentially limiting the sequences he can take by having less access to mana. So, like, the 75 HP nerf at, like, level 11, 13 against Magic is far more than it seems. It's probably hitting his AP off Seraph's Recursion, if that's an interaction. And so we probably see a meaningfully weaker Rise. That means, well, I would assume he is so systemically supported that if you are playing Rise right now, you probably do continue to have good Rise conditions, but, like, the way that pro players were B1ing Rise, I think probably P- should not be doing that and should probably be looking for, like, really consistent kill targets in the mid lane with just, like, mid jungle 2v2 off Rise, right? Instead of just blind picking him, especially since, like, you blind pick him on live, he does have some bad matchups, he can kind of endure them just by playing them after playing the wave, but, like, I don't know, it's impacting everything. It's impacting everything. Udyr. Udyr is losing 1% bonus physical damage per 100 bonus AD. He is then gaining up to 10% attack speed. Now, this is kind of nice for my Trinity builds, which, you know, I've been playing a lot of Udyr lately because I've role swapped jungle and he fits my style. Like, he lets me use my Taric skills kind of indirectly in his combat pattern. I'm comfortable on, like, the kind of full clear nature, and I like his kind of defensive, like, style with the ability to go offensive. So I've been experimenting with a bunch of builds lately. I have not played Prowler's Udyr, though. This is the second direct nerf to Prowler's Udyr, which is definitely the most volatile and most solo queue-esque build, which also means that it's still quite good in IBS, which also means that it's still good in, like reasonably good in, like, Platinum and stuff. But that build is definitely hitting, like, funny tier when you start to get to, like, Diamond Masters, to my knowledge. This offset means that, like, any non-funny AD Udyr build doesn't care and is not impacted whatsoever, and you're still going to find, like, you're probably going to find more value out of it, truthfully, like the Trinity or the Bork builds. And to clarify, Bork is only in conditions where they're moving straight into you, and you don't have to go on the offensive. This one is more significant than it seems. This is effectively minus 40 over the course of its duration, right? Wingborne Storm, minus 40. Because if it's minus 5 per tick, and there's 8 ticks, like 2 per second, 4 seconds, yeah, that's minus 40 damage. Now it is a DPS champion, so that means he would be impacted like a little less than a burst champion, and he's losing some demonic damage. But he's also, like, hilariously broken right now. Now, last time we had a hilariously broken champion, and I saw, like, a bunch of nerfs, that was last patch with the Aatrox, he did end up falling back into kind of his old identity of, like, being a 15 to 25 minute skirmish champion, and requiring a lot more skill to pilot well, because you can't just teamfight to the same degree. So we can't just say, like, it's a nothing change. Because, like, minus 40 matters, but no, I mean, it matters, but it's a champion who giga power farms, who has so much durability to play with, that I think he ultimately won't mind if he has to play, like, a slightly longer fight to kill people. Not to mention that it's, like, very negligibly affecting empowered R, like, its full damage is, like, its empowered damage is not, like, taking a hit, it's only the base damage. So, yeah, truthfully, it is... Okay, here's what I'll end up saying about Udyr. If Prowler's Udyr, like, Prowler's Udyr is still killing you, but the last nerf stopped him from over-killing you. There is a non-zero chance that Prowler's Udyr, I wouldn't know from experience, is just killing you, and therefore this nerf would matter for that build. However, the Trinity bear builds are completely unaffected. The Phoenix builds would only really be brought down further by Demonic, but I genuinely think that Udyr is, like, durable enough, and his play pattern is, like, power farm heavy enough. He's getting the resources to play out the long fights that he wants. I genuinely think that, like, any non-Prowler's build is, like, virtually unaffected in terms of its pick conditions, no matter what level of play you're at, no matter how you're playing him. The Udyr players are going to keep playing Udyr, and they will still be very satisfied with the champion that they're playing, even though it's minus 40 damage. Like, I have the feeling, based on the type of champion he is, that can't matter. Because it's not a full revert of, like, minus 80 damage, you know? Okay, everybody has sent me this one. I've received so many DMs about Yuumi. Oh my god, okay. Holy shit. First of all, I was right last patch. 50 damage off a poke spell is damning. Now Yuumi survived, even though I said that might be the end of her. Why did she survive? Because she went straight back to her utility builds, and they were in a good spot. But poke Yuumi, if you check pro builds, like if you look at the esports wiki and you see like what the Yumis in pro play have been building still, none of them have stuck with poke. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Minus 75 attack range, minus 6 base AD, minus 50 base health, minus 2 base regen. Okay, why is this ridiculous? Because one of Yumi's greatest strengths is the ability to hop out early game, fist fight you to like 2 HP, and then just attach, chug her potions, never take damage anymore, right? Yumi could trade entire health bars down and then win the lane off of it. Like, if she was in the right lane, where she was just fist fighting, right? That strength is now heavily gimped because minus 50, minus 6, minus 75 means that it's way, 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 way harder for her to actually have an impact while hopping off, right? Okay, she's getting 450 total range, which is Morgana range, by the way, which is not good. For one auto only, and then she's less than that. Oh god. Plus the shield is being decreased in value, which is being compounded by her heal shield itemization. The ratio on W is halved, which was another one of her like big strengths, right? Like when Veigar was in a bit of a better state, I would hop on a Veigar and he's like plus 100 AP, and then I'm plus 60 AP, and then like... And now the AP ratio off of Zumi's movement speed is gone, so it's a flat 20, which on a, like, what is it, 10-second cooldown? That's terrible! Okay, so Yumi has so many strengths, and they have now hit all of them, right? Heal uptime is poor off her first set of nerfs in this, like, whole sequence. Then they hit the Q, then they hit the fist fighting, then they hit the shield, then they hit the secret aura stats, right? So all she realistically has left is the summoner spell advantage. And it's a shame because unironically Yumi is kind of cool and has skill expression. I'm not... And she is a cool champion, but goddamn is she toxic for the game, right? Yeah, so Yumi is basically being removed from the game before the rework. Now, please, God, IBS players, you should not have been picking Yumi before this. So don't pick her now. Yeah, no, Yumi should be probably removed from all levels of play off this. This is a lot. This is hitting literally every aspect of her output. This is tremendous. This is ridiculous. What does that mean for the greater game around her? Sivir becomes harder to pick by a lot because the best Sivir pick conditions were like UFP Yumi, the enemy takes Zeri, you get Sivir. So she does actually affect AD carry pick conditions around her a little bit. But ultimately, pool limitations, like, oh, it's now harder to pick Sona because this was one of Sona's best opponents. So August actually said Riot's goal was to remove her entirely until her rework as she was too toxic in her current state. I can't disagree, even though I think she's cool. I can't disagree. So, yeah. She's gone, and we'll have ripple effects throughout the game. Which does mean that if Yumi was a core piece of your pool in amateur play, you are going to have to find something to replace her. You are going to have to find a champion. Like Lulu is probably in pool for everyone already, but, like... what can even replace her? You can't just pick Sona this way. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to do some problem solving because like you can't just take a -1 champion in your pool when amateur players should be playing out with like pools just big enough to not get fucked in ban phase, right? Sorry, I forgot I'm putting this on YouTube. I don't want to get demonetized. you can't just go -1 champion in your pool when amateur players should be playing out, like, with a champion pool exactly large enough to not get completely screwed over in the ban phase. Right? Yumi PNG over the bat. One of my shorts got demonetized already for doing, like, basically that. I just wanted a better take. So yeah, rest in peace, Yumi. Zoe! Zoe is one of the few burst mages that hasn't been adjusted to new magic resist values. Her success in lower levels of play is suffering as a result. It's been more challenging for her to find the kills early in the game. So, worth noting that at high levels of play, Zoe doesn't have to get her kills, because as kind of a weird poke champion, she's satisfied getting you to 2 HP and forcing you to recall. That said, it's nice when she can get kills. I am on the Zoe support train. I think she's good. If you can play her, which most people can't. But Zoe mid has been... Yeah, Zoe mid kind of needs the greater kill threat, no. Zoe support doesn't need to close out the kills on her own. Zoe mid probably would prefer to gain income rights, to... Yeah. Either way, this is nuts. This means that for exactly one hit, there is a fat magic resist reduction on you. It's a big one, right? Like, Eve's is 35 to 45%, and that is, like, a tremendously gigantic one. Zoe's not that extreme. But it's still, like, you know, you just lose 20% to 30% MR by mid-game. Now, I almost want to say Zoe support was leveling W second sometimes? No? Drafting her with AP dots would be huge. Misfortune's physical, right? But... yeah. No, you can... Zoe Lilia. Imagine that. But the E is not. The MFE is not. I mean, that's a very niche interaction. Yeah. Either way, this is just a gigantic boost of damage to Zoe. Gigantic. How's that stacking with flat pen? Reduction applies first. I believe it's flat reduction into percent reduction into percent pen into flat pen. I think that's the order. Something like that. Like, I think if there's an inversion in there somewhere. So basically, more Zoe damage means more Zoe snowball, which means better Zoe played in levels where there are more mistakes equals significantly more fed Zoe. And significantly more fed Zoe means greater ability to terrorize the game. Zoe has a large warp factor. She makes walls unsafe. She changes the way you have to move around the map. That is disgusting in platinum level play, right? Zoe, therefore disproportionately gets stronger in platinum, but does get stronger at all levels, right? Because the the D plus mid laners are going to be more capable of, like, actually closing out the kills they need to justify running this champion. The low level players are just killing people again. As long as they're capable of playing Zoe, right? Zoe does have a pretty major mechanical skill check that weakens her in IVS, right? D plus Kia, the LC... yeah, god damn it. But the TLDR is Zoe in both her roles is, like, a lot more appealing, and we'll keep an eye out for her. Because burst champions receiving damage is big. Like, they're more affected by small changes. This is not a small change! This is not a small change whatsoever. Even on low MR targets, going from low MR values to lower MR values is like, you know, the difference between 0 and 10 MR is way different than is way greater than the difference between 10 and 20 MR. So Zoe be hurting, and she deserves it because she is weak. Okay, do we have any other thing? I'm going to do a full rundown at the end. I'm going to, like, a full review at the end. But do we have anything else we want to talk about for champions before we move on? She's not that bad in support. She's really not. She's really not that bad in support because she can get a lot of help closing out her kills. Yeah, but she didn't used to be that way when she just dealt more damage and was more capable of trading Paradox. Zoe was a lot more pickable before. And it's not like her matchups just magically... It's not like more bad matchups were introduced to the game. It's just they got harder to play because she became less capable of fighting, right? When a champ like Cass is meta, she can't do a lot. Okay, that's the most extreme example you could give! And it's been longer than that. It's been far longer than that, where Zoe's been fairly difficult to pick, right? Okay, let's move on to items. Okay, so we actually do need to read the context of this one so we can get a greater feel for like what they're trying to do here. Adjustments this patch that should help reduce some of the current frustration with fighters, the high levels of sustain, and ability haste that the class has access to. To tackle ability haste or separating it from most defensive items, a fighter will need to pick between haste and durability. Okay. Delaying power into third item. As far as Omnivamp goes, we want to curb stacking sources to slow down snowballing. So some of the weak ones will get worse. Okay. What have we got? Oh, also worth pointing out, this is another champion who is weakened not only by the durability update, but also by the prominence of Lifeline. So, you know, just getting any bit of damage is nice. Eclipse is losing its Omnivamp and gaining haste. The shield is becoming more accessible. And it is now a Serrated Dirk Caulfield's Warhammer item. No sustain on Eclipse. Okay. I was doing an 80 Bruiser itemization study, which I never got the chance to finish, which is a damn shame, because I needed just a little more time on Eclipse, Rav Hydra, DD, like the sort of like more pure damage options, and then the second item options, to be like super confident about how this will affect things, right? Systemic changes are usually pretty sweeping. What does this mean? Ability haste. God, that's kind of nice. Duskblade Prowlers and Eclipse all have the same build. Yeah. Yeah, they do. If you are a core Eclipse user, you will probably not be significantly affected by this because the greater ability to trade with your shield should offset the loss of the Omnivamp. The ranged users in particular should actually be very happy with this, right? Like, so I'm thinking Jace loves access to the haste. Senna loves access to the haste. Senna's gonna hurt a little bit off the Omnivamp because she's so squishy and likes its healing, but like, whatever. This harms Aatrox further. He actually does value the Omnivamp quite a bit. Most champs really don't care for the healing on it, which is true. Aatrox does. Kayn does. Those champions are struggling a little bit, or Rust specifically, those champions will be struggling like a little bit more because Kayn can go deeper into Gore Drinker. Aatrox kind of doesn't love that one with his play pattern. It is probably power positive for all of its core users, but anyone who's kind of just like on the fence chilling with it, I mean, like, no, it's means the build path is a little harder to lane with top lane, you know? The build path is, like, a little harder to lane with. I think this is, like... I would not be surprised if there were only, like, 2-3 champions that got, like, noticeably harmed by this, and the rest of the core users liked this, and then, like, anyone who isn't a core user kind of, like, stays away a bit, you know? Gore Drinker, 7 ability haste, now 50 health plus 3 ability haste. Oh, that's bad for Riven. That's really bad for Riven. That's my first thought. It's a mythic passive change, so, like, that only starts to matter, like, late. No? Are any of these, like, super big? Are any of these, like, massive changes? This one's big. This one's funny. Okay, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Itemization changes. The things most likely to affect most of the game. It kind of seems like Gore Drinker's ability or mythic passive now just does 2 things poorly. You really find that the mythic passives are kind of negligible? Are you crazy? Yeah, Paradox is right. Some of them are good, some of them don't really do that much. Like the plus 100 on some 100 HP on some tank items are like, okay, they're kind of nice to have. They're a nice boon. The M-Pen mythic passives are quite good. The haste mythic passives can be good. Like any penetration mythic passive is like actually really good. This one now does 2 things poorly rather than being like an actually noticeably good thing for certain champions. Well, the ADC ones matter because Kraken has attack speed, right? And the shield bow health really matters on some champions. Rav Hydra is now no longer Omnivamp. It has more haste, and the cleave damage now triggers lifesteal. Okay. It is healing you noticeably less if you're not an auto attacker. Yeah, it is healing you noticeably less if you're an auto attacker. Wow. But if you are an auto attacker, if you are a pure auto attacker, you just get more haste. That's all it does, right? If you're an auto attacker, you get more haste, and it's nice. If you're not an auto attacker, you're healing for less. Other than that, like, the item is still, in its current state, just a big stat stick. Although, because it's not outright broken, because it's received its, like, set of nerfs, the only thing it's really good for is, like, having the most AD on one item, plus, like, a bit of sustain, right? So now you also have to compare it back to Black Cleaver if you're just a generalist user who is like, oh, Hydra's strong, I'll build Hydra. If you can gain more sources of lifesteal, yes. Otherwise, it's just net neutral. So this would only be valuable on, like, Bork users, right? Ma actually gains more lifesteal on Lifeline. It's a little odd. Just lifesteal on lifesteal on Lifeline actually makes this quite a bit weaker. But it's plus 10 AD on a defensive item with no haste. Ugh. You're still going to buy Ma in the conditions in which it's necessary. It's just going to make you less overwhelmingly durable, right? Death Stance, more damage, more armor, no haste. The healing on takedowns is, like, significantly reduced. Chain Vest Caulfield's pickaxe is now Chain Vest pickaxe. That's funny. Ma goes back to sitting on Hex Drinker. Well, isn't Hex Drinker, like, really underwhelming as, like, on its own? Like, it's fine, right? Okay, if you would take magic damage below 30%, you gain 111 to 280. This one is... Wait, what? Okay, I mean, this one is like plus... This one is like double the original base. It's actually less base at high levels, but then, like, the more AD you have, the better the shield is. So, I mean, like, the shield is still better because they've increased its AD. Like, plus 10 AD means, like, math, 20, 22. Yeah, it's like 22. Okay, 22 shielding is, like, nothing. What is our overall takeaway from these changes? Basically, they're just hitting the items that keep you alive. They're hitting the items that keep you alive, and they're making them better at doing damage. Right? They're trying to make all of these better at doing damage. So the first conclusion I will draw is that build this. Why are they buffing this one? Why are they buffing this item? That's the first conclusion I will draw, okay? Black Cleaver is a really overwhelming stat stick on way more champions than you would think. Like, literally anybody capable of outputting multiple instances of physical damage should just, like, at this and go, like, I want this immediately. You are getting 400, oh, hold on. Let's go to everything, right? You are getting 400 health now. What is it, 55? Or just 50? Yeah, you're getting 400 health, 50 AD, 30 haste. That's so much haste on one item, right? You're getting the, like, rage passive, which isn't, like, a big deal, but, you know, 18 flat movement speed on top of everything else, kind of nice. You're getting just, like, 5% armor reduction every time you hit them if you have backloaded damage patterns. Like, goddamn, that's kind of excellent, right? Black Cleaver Rush has been a thing, right? Black Cleaver Rush ADC will not be a thing. No, chat, no. Samira Black Cleaver sounds funny, but probably not the play, right? A lot of defensive items have just lost all their haste. So this item that was already good, that has, like, the most haste that you can get, is all of a sudden, like, really skyrocketing in value. In terms of the actual items that got hit, like, people are still going to be building DD, even though the Defy healing is a little lower, just because it is valuable to have that, like, bleed over time, especially now that it's doing, like, some more damage, giving you some more resistances. Like, we're not going to really change our Death Stance pick conditions very much, right? We were pretty reasonably sure that Eclipse Core users are not being dramatically affected. I mean, Gore Drinker's Mythic passive kind of sucks now for some of the people who really valued this. It's just doing two things that aren't incredible, like, at these values. But, you know, we're not changing our Gore Drinker conditions for it. Gore Drinker's just kind of only really good for big teamfight contexts. Hydra, I mean, its competitors are a lot more compelling, in current state, when it's just offering the most AD on one item, and when, like, if you're not a pure auto attacker, you are definitely losing a lot of value on this. And I guess we do kind of talk about the Maw. Is it worth upgrading Hex Drinker to Maw for a bigger shield? Or should we just actually try to... I mean, yeah, sitting on the Hex Drinker could kind of feel bad then, because then you inevitably have to build the Maw. Like, maybe it's better to just go on a lot of champions like Damage Mythic, Cleaver, Fawn? So yeah, I'm just kind of having a hard time, like, immediately envisioning the impact of, like, okay, so, like, let's be perfectly clear, right? This wasn't, like, a dominant property of the item. The big thing that is changing about the item is that you're losing haste, and that sucks. You're gaining 10 AD, and I don't think that offsets 20 haste. The shield is still much fatter if you finish it. It's just across the board, Across the board, it is harder to stay alive, and we'll kind of see the ripple effects of that, unless you're a Cleaver user. The probable outcome for Bruiser players that are not Cleaver users on their champions. The probable outcome in IBS and gold is negligible because you are still just going to be snowballing most likely on your champions. I'm thinking like junglers, plat diamond, who only get room for 2 items in their budget. Yeah, if those 2 items are not like mythic cleaver or like cleaver tank mythic or something like that. For the record, cleaver, IBG, Vi. It's kind of a better version of Vi. I mean, yeah, don't change your mind on Death's Dance. Do change your mind on Cleaver if you're not building it. Few people like this. Don't change your mind on Eclipse too much. It really just comes down to, like, in the moment, I cannot predict if the loss of this haste is meaningful enough. Because the more I think about Ma, the more I think, like, I kind of feel bad having to build this. Now that it's not, like, an offensive juggernaut item as well. So, I wonder if that actually opens up pick conditions for, like, Gwen in Diamond. It just comes down to, is Ma essential enough to still build in a lot of situations? I mean, Aatrox... God damn! Aatrox is getting boned! Dude, these systems are all Aatrox nerfs. All of these systems are Aatrox nerfs, too. And Aatrox already dropped from tier 0. Like, Aatrox dropped substantially from tier 0. He was just a fine champion. A fine kind of aggro champ now. But now, like, oh my god, we might actually see, like, 45% win rate Aatrox in solo queue. And obviously that has ripple effects through the competitive ecosystem. Like... But what do top laners end up doing then if a lot of tanks have unfavorable lane phases and poor itemization? A lot of bruisers... The bruisers are really not losing too much if their Death Stance is still an okay item. Like, it's just... This is an indirect Kennen buff because the Maw feels less appealing in terms of combat power. If you have to answer Kennen, you're losing some of your damage, and then he's safer. Kennen is already a meta call where you pick him into, like, a lot of favorable skirmisher matchups, and he's a fine champ in those cases, even though he's, like, a little weak outside of them. Yeah, forgive me, guys. I'm getting my brain stuck on Ma, and just I can't move past it, and so that's just an indicator that we'll just kind of have to check to see how this one affects pick conditions of magic damage champions within the top lane, if it does at all. But please build that Black Cleaver. Like, please, 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 please start looking at this immediately. Why did they buff it? Why did they buff it? Grievous Wounds. Okay. There's some interesting stuff happening in the Grievous Wounds section. Okay, sorry, I'll address this one. 20 CDR loss is rough to an item you already didn't like. Well, I did like it off offensive value, but it lost offensive value. So now you build it out of obligation and you don't feel good. It's not off this factor, just off this factor. Grievous Wounds. So, every Grievous Wounds item is getting changed, and we're getting to 40% Grievous baseline. So that is really, really, really huge for the components, right? That's huge for the components. 40% on Orb, 40% on Executioners, 40% on Bramble, and the magic damage reflected is a little bit better, so it's not completely useless for this purpose anymore. But we still don't really consider that. Looking at the actual items, Putrefier is now a Forbidden Idol item with a bigger combined cost, which can feel a little bit bad. It is noticeably less AP, noticeably less haste, plus 8% heal shield power, and also you can't give your allies grievous wounds, you have to do the damage. Okay, this item sucks. This item, it used to be the best way of applying grievous wounds. Now, look, can you truthfully say that having 8% heal shield when its competitors are like the 16% Mikhail's redemption? Like, can you really say that's a compelling reason to opt into this? It's really just, who is hitting opponents? You have to be a poke enchanter. And at that point, just put it on your mage with actual income, because Oblivion Orb doesn't suck anymore, right? So, like, for the purposes of anti-heal. So, like, I am not a fan of Putrefier in current states. That doesn't look compelling at all. Morellonomicon, it loses 100 health, but it now has 10 magic penetration. So yeah, the value of upgrading this, like, when you need to is okay, but like that as a damage item, this is obviously never competing with Shadow Flame. It is never competing with Rabadons. It is never competing with Void. It is never competing with, like, even Seraphs, right? Which has just so much flat AP. Morellonomicon just gives you a little bit more damage when you finished it, but you're not going to be in any urgent, like, position to finish it. So, truthfully, yeah, just sit on the orb whenever you need it as a magic damage champion, and you will not be seeing these completed until, like, the end of the game, and when you do see them completed, I mean, like, you're buying this for a haste stick, but it's a bad haste stick. Wow, Morello's is better in most cases. That's unreal. Yay! Supports are released from Grievous Jail. Hooray! Okay, Chainsword. This isn't its actual value. They copied the attack damage down, but it's a worse stat stick, so if you're building it solely for the stat stick after it's already received a stat stick nerfs, stop it. Mortal Reminder is interesting. So the coolest thing about this change is Senna actually swaps from Chainsword to Mortal now. Attack speed is gone, but armor pen is up to 30%. This one is compelling. This one is a compelling option. So it is a way to hybridize on, like, an 80 carrier, like any physical champion, really. Any physical champion. It's a way to hybridize your pen and your executioners well. Garen no longer has Mortal. Oh my god, Garen has no Zeal options. That's awful for him. That's really bad for his power. We just sit on Zeal for a while. You know what? Yeah, that's actually the overall theme of this patch, isn't it? So Mortal Reminder so far is, like, the only option that looks compelling to finish, like, at any reasonable on-curve time, right? Lord Doms is getting a funny buff just for fun. We've already talked about Bramble. Thornmail, we're upping its damage, even though Thornmail's damage is already quite excellent, and it's already, like, one of the better armor options, right? And now you can't apply your Grievous on CC anymore. You have to take a hit. So the most consistent way to apply anti-heal now will just be sitting on Oblivion Orb, or it will be having somebody who likes to build Mortal Reminder. Those are the more consistent ways. The Bramble buff is, like, moderately impactful. It's not going back up to its, like, disgusting you die immediately sort of status, but it's okay. It's decent. Thornmail is, like, yeah, exclusively versus auto attackers, but it's way better at its job. There are 2 completed mythics that we care about. Or 2 completed legendaries, rather, that we care about. Right. Hi, Croy. We only care about Mortal. We only care about Thornmail. Everything else, don't build it until endgame. I'm gonna go collect my cat, who's mad at me. Oh, you can't? Anna. You can't sit and yell at the door and then leave before I open it. That's not... Can you TLDR what I said about Mortal? Sure. Well, first of all, as a Senna player, I look at this and I think, like, okay, I'm building Mortal instead of Chainsword now. Mortal is actually probably like the most compelling Grievous option to finish now, just off 30% flat pen. Like, sure, it's going to be less damage than LDR, of course, but it's an option that you're actually allowed to finish and then curve into other items, right? Because, like, it is a compelling amount of penetration. It is a reasonably good build path, like... Yeah. My cat doesn't like to hang out with me while I'm talking out loud for some reason. She doesn't like my voice. Anna! Don't be a jerk. Come here. Support is no longer on Grievous duty, but ADC is now. Well, ADC can be, but the best user is the mages sitting on Oblivion Orb. I'm trying to show the cat, but the fossil will not jump on my lap. Here, Anna. No, okay, usually she sits on my lap, but today she has left. Unfortunately, I cannot show cat. She also kills you if you pick her up, so we will not be doing that. ADC now buys Mythic and then IE Quick Blades and then Mortal, which can be really good. Yep, that's true, that's true. On the right champion, because we now have to talk about the AD carry class adjustments, which then we'll be able to come back and talk about Mortal more particularly, right? More specifically. Changes will add power to ADCs overall. I watched Freak's video about his intentions with these changes. He was just trying to make AD carry players feel like they have more agency without introducing too much power into them. So let's talk about this. Infinity Edge and Quick Blades can now be built on your second item. There's a few weird points that have been brought up off of this. The first one is Gangplank being allowed to skip one of his extra crit cloaks to go IE second, as he would anyway. So given that he already would do that, he's just getting it 800 gold cheaper. I don't see any genuine... I don't anticipate like a humongous change in Gangplank's power, but they're pre-nerfing him, and we'll keep him on a watch list, obviously. Quick Blades users gain greater access to their item, and that is actually meaningfully power impacting, especially since we're going to see a lot of champions gaining more mana, right? Infinity Edge is power impacting to get second item, that is true, but remember that you are critting less frequently. That being said, Infinity Edge first item historically was a thing, and like you just gained so much access to just big chunks of damage, right? Kraken IE Draven. Yeah. That's funny. Or you could just do like Essence Reaver IE Mythicless would probably be better for him. There's a lot of things to kind of assess. So yeah, any champion that is purely AD reliant, like, or champions that have steroids in their kits, right? Tristana, Draven, Samira, champions like this are going to be noticeably stronger by being allowed to build Infinity Edge second. Aphelios too, actually. Aphelios also gets a lot of value from that. Champions who are more dependent on attack speed will scale slower still, like, because having Mythic plus IE second is, like, awkward because you do actually like and value the PD in a lot of cases. I think we're going to kind of see almost a return to some Season 6 strategies. So my expectation is we will see a lot of attack speed carries building Mythic, Zeal, Infinity Edge. The theme of Season 13 to me is components. We are seeing a lot more value in tank itemization, now in bruiser itemization with potentially just Maw, now with Grievous Wounds. We're seeing time and time again, they're trying to make us think about the value of components and sitting on them. The Zeal is there because an attack speed carry sitting like... An attack speed carry curving straight into physical damage is a little uncomfortable at times. Like, remember the old school way of building IE first item, which was BF Sword, Zeal, Infinity Edge. Remember that one? Just to give you like all of the stats you kind of wanted by the time your big spike comes online. So I think like Xayah, Jinx, arguably maybe Neela, definitely, no, but Twitch is Bork. I was gonna say Twitch. We'll find like attack speed champions like that who like would definitely value the Infinity Edge, but they're probably going to be stronger by taking that 1,000 gold detour into Zeal and just spiking a little bit later than some of their raw physical counterparts, but then still coming online earlier, right? Essence Reaver and Devori Ezreal is going to be fun. Yes, Ezreal doesn't have to opt into Kraken anymore, which was, like, okay for him, but it was still awkward. So now, Ezreal, like, I mean, I'm not going to say there's, like, a really beautiful, like, I mean, there could be an Essence Reaver and Devori, Cyrilda's, like, Mythicless Duskblade, sort of, not Duskblade, I hate Duskblade, but Prowlers. There could be something like that coming up for Ezreal, who knows? Some people have brought up Yasuo Yone IE Rush. I think that sounds appalling. I think their attack speed, like Shield Bow, is way too valuable. I don't think Zerker Rush into IE is probably going to be strong enough for them. Especially Yasuo, who needs the extra survivability from Shield Bow. I wouldn't be concerned about that, although you never know. Sometimes things just do too much damage, so who knows? Yeah, but the reasonable expectation with this change right here is that the raw physical damage, like AD carries, are going to spike in power. And in solo queue, I fully expect Samira to just become a menace. That doesn't mean she's, like, full pickable and competitive. In IBS, as long as you have, like, an engaged support, by all means, you just take over games. Gold and higher, you do have to draft her appropriately, but people still make mistakes, and Samira can take over games. Like, she's actually probably becoming a noticeably stronger champion. Bloodthirster, it's losing some lifesteal, but the shield is going up noticeably, and it's cheaper to buy. You will still lose damage for building this inappropriately. It makes Aphelios way stronger once he's allowed to get it, right? It will feel bad as a second item nowadays, even though it used to be, like, pretty okay. Basically, yeah, Aphelios is the best pick condition for this champion. Aphelios is the best pick condition for this item, like, where you just kind of go, like, Mythic IEBT in anti-engage games. I do not think, in the context of, like, competitive play, that you should just look at this, say, I have an option that I can build when my teammates can't peel me, and then draft no peel for yourself, just assuming you can build Bloodthirster. Because then you are noticeably gimping your damage for no gain. The option of Bloodthirster early is here for a solo queue context, not a competitive context. That being said, the fatter shield is going to be horrifying at late levels. Granted, that's at level 18, and when is your AD carry getting to level 18? Like, it's just a better anti-engage item for endgame, and it is a better psychosis engage option for mid-game, I guess. It's just the Infinity, like really, when Infinity Edge is a second item, it's really crowding this out early, right? We have a ton of mana growth changes. I am not going to assess the impact of these, although Jhin has a cost one here. Okay, Jinx is one that could actually be, like, a little bit scary. I am not going to try to assess the impact of these too much. Ricochet cost. Predominantly because everybody is getting it. They're trying to unbind AD carries from Presence of Mind. It is on our watch list to check if they succeeded. If they didn't, everyone can simply fight in lane a little more, right? And then we also have to so we also have to consider Bork. What's happening here? The actual active damage is lower, the ranged on-hit damage is up. Now, this is a percent current health on hits, which we assessed Lilia's of 1% max health per second to be reasonable DPS, right? If we assessed Lilia's like that, then we would then have to say that Blade of the Ruined King is also quite a bit stronger for ranged users in terms of DPS. It is a noticeable increase, especially in the first few hits. This siphon damage change, I mean, truthfully, it is like eventually a 50 damage burst change, but at a point in the game in which 50 damage bursts can't really matter too much. So like ultimately you're a little concerned about the cooldown if you're like Irelia specifically. And it still feels weird to me who can like looks at DPS changes and says like that's not really that huge to kind of look at this and say, well, maybe it is, because like 1% max health DPS is actually a very significant change now that I think about it. I know it's current. I know it's current. But that said, this is absolutely not significant enough to create bork conditions on champions who did not have them before. It's like an Ashe thing, it's a Twitch thing. Maybe we look at on-hit Varus again a little bit, because like it's not absurd to think that Ginsu's with the current state of Blight is appealing. Maybe we look at this again, but yeah, I don't know. It's big, but not big enough to create more conditions, right? Demonic Embrace. Now, as we said, 1% max health damage in DPS is kind of big. 0.2% max health in DPS kind of isn't. Now, okay, how long does it tick for? Let's be fair to it and like let's actually assess the full change. It ticks for 4 seconds. So actually it's losing almost 1%, right? So actually, you know, meaningful DPS change. While the ranged champions are getting some back, because like, yeah, they're right. This is genuinely an appalling item on ranged DPS. If you're losing 0.8% max health over 4 seconds, cast go burr, cast potentially go burr. Actually, it is a good call out that ranged mages who would have the option to go Rod of Ages rather than Leandries actually gain quite a bit of value from this when it's strong. Because remember, as these guys are losing almost 1% max health over 4 seconds, these guys are gaining it. Truthfully, because the DPS change is so negligible and like the only time it looks appealing is if you look at the whole 4 seconds, I'm not really anticipating that Demonic Embrace is going to be like much weaker, and therefore all the nerfs to the champions who are using it above make a lot more sense. Essence Reaver is currently letting down the champions that want to build it the most, so we're upping its power to be a bit more in line with other itemization options. Okay. It's an Ezreal item, and he's gaining a little more AD, and he's happy with that. Cool. It's a Draven item, and he's gaining more AD, and he's very happy with that, okay? He's very happy with that. The historical Essence Reaver users who used it for mana aren't switching back to it. There's more compelling options, like that's his Sivir Zaya. We're not creating more pick conditions off this, especially when, like, this change just occurred, and it's, like, changing the way you have to pursue your early game. Like, guys, if you're not able to build Essence Reaver, like, early into the game, you're not gaining Essence Reaver value. Because by the time, like, okay, let's imagine. It's like, okay, we've gotten our Mythic, we've gotten our IE. Now what? Well, I probably have to build, like, LDR, or I probably have to build PD. Maybe I have to build Mortal in this condition. So I can get my pen, I can get my attack speed. And then eventually I'm going to need, like, GA, I might need a Bloodthirster, like, I might need my defensive options here. So, like, you just hit this awkward point where it's like... And all the mana changes as well, which is reducing the need to have its passive. Who wants this third with the other options in the game? The only situation in which you'll find this third is if, like, you are a very specific Sheen user who is against, like, 1,000,000 squishies and you have no need for attack speed, and that doesn't create more champions who would want it. Like, arguably Neela has a condition for this now, I guess, if you're, like, against a lot of squishies. But that's genuinely the only one I can think of off the top of my head. And that's it, right? That's everything? No, there's a Chemtech Drake buff that doesn't change our prioritization of Drakes. It just gives us more heal shield power per stack, and like that's potentially powerful when its value increases, right? Okay. Yeah, it's worth pointing out that Ezreal's mana regeneration growth going up throughout a game. No, I mean, he's not ever running He's not ever running Yeah, basically the intention with these is to try to unlock... The intention of these is to try to unlock Overheal and Triumph on 80 carries who would ordinarily have to take Presence of Mind. But there is no legitimate way to predict whether they've succeeded without trying it. Okay, well, don't forget that an Overheal buff was supposed to come in this patch, and it didn't. So we'll check 13.3. Like, actually, they've changed no runes, right? That must be a hotfix thing. 13.3 is the next patch, because this was supposed to be 13.2, but it wasn't. And they renamed it to reflect the fact that they have to hotfix it in. It's just a weird, like, problem thing that they ended up with. Okay, does anybody have any, like, really critical last-minute additions that we have to talk about? I'm gonna have so much stuff to cut out. And I've missed my nap for the day, so I'm a little cranky. I have some fun builds to look at. Yeah, we're going to see some funny things. I mean, maybe even, like... Okay, I mean, I'm thinking about this from an 80 carry perspective, too, and, like... Yeah, it's just... Most of the takeaways from this patch are going to be questions, right? There's a lot of changes that, like, very obviously change how we approach our draft strategies and, like, very obviously shift around power levels to a real degree. But there's also a lot of things that just require testing. We'll do a very quick recap of everything that we just talked about. Gangplank, I was expecting, you know, we don't really care about this nerf. We have to assess the impact of earlier Infinity Edge, like minus 800 gold in the crit cloak for him, because ultimately he's overkilling you anyway, and he's expected to be fine. Heimerdinger actually does become, like, a little less oppressive in the bot lane because it's just... The loss of HP on his turrets is meaningful, and it's going to be easier for his specific counter picks to clear them out. He's still devastating the champions that he beats, but he will be easier for the average player to answer. Kassadin, his nerf is a little bit offset by the fact that he has, like, cooldown refunds, and ultimately what this impacts is his ability to defend himself before he comes online, especially since this is his first max, but realistically, in, like, most levels of play, he's going to be able to scale anyway, and players are going to struggle to keep him down. He's too systemically supported for this to be, like, a power devastating change. Kindred is a negligible DPS change that will only really affect the clear speeds of, like, D+ competitive leagues. Lilia actually does gain some meaningful DPS, but she's in such a poor state now that we're gonna have to just kind of wait and see, and the DPS increase is kind of offset by Demonic's DPS decrease, even though it's, like, kind of negligible for actual DPS. It only matters when you look at the whole thing. But yeah, Lilia gains a DPS change predominantly from this, and this terrorizes Platinum. Ultimately, probably not, like, crazy pick conditions coming from that, but if you like to play Lilia jungle, you'll feel better. If you like to play Lilia top, you'll feel even better in the right pick conditions. Lucian, we talked about this forever. There's just too many factors at play to really reliably predict whether this actually impacts his ability to play out a lane phase sequence. Although expectation is leaning towards very little impact, right? Maokai, it's not a full revert. At the levels of play where he dominates, like, he's going to continue dominating. He's really, like, he's too flexible to really be meaningfully harmed by this. In higher levels of play where the clear speed matters, even though it's a poke damage change, right? He's losing poke damage. He's not completely dependent on that. He's got too much going for him to really shift in priority for most levels of amateur play. Nami, the changes are more impactful than they would look because in the context of her being a burst champion, this, like, almost approaches our threshold of, like, needing to take note in the early game. That said, if you are a team who already picks Nami for her other capabilities because you don't have, like, more specific disengaged champions, your pick conditions will not change at all. It's most likely to just impact the power of Lucian Nami, but we still have to assess that against Quick Blades and right. Orianna, 50 base damage at level 1 is, like, actually a really huge buff. Or at level 6, rather, rank 1 is actually a really huge buff. Ultimately, like, most of these are kind of negligible. Like, this is, like, a tiny wave clear thing. If it hits a breakpoint, she becomes way stronger. A wave clear breakpoint. This is a support Orianna buff, which is funny, so I'm going to be investigating that. Rise looks like he got a double dip nerf that actually meaningfully hits his durability and his ability to output damage in the late game. So even though his systems are good, I think he's interacting with his systems a little less, and we'll have to be careful about blind picking him at lower levels of play. Udyr, ultimately fine on most builds is the expectation. It's just maybe the Prowler's build stops overkilling, and so Trinity would be the superior bear build. We'll have to wait and see. Yumi's not in the game anymore. Just, oh god. Zoe is actually gaining a lot of value in the solo lanes, where she actually is responsible for closing out her kills herself. She's just gaining a lot of damage as a burst champion, which is valuable because systems are kind of weighted against her right now with durability update in 12.10, with lifeline in 13.1, like, this is a valuable buff that is probably going to increase your ability to pick Zoe, because when she does enough damage, her matchups are no longer, like, that difficult to play out, right? For fighter items, we're not really concerned about Eclipse on its core users. Gore Drinkers, Mythic passive looks like it got a lot worse because it's doing two things poorly. Ravenous Hydra is noticeably weaker on casters, but is, like, actually a little bit better on auto attackers. Maw of Malmortius we're feeling kind of bad about right now, like, because we used to love just curving into this and having, like, this beautiful one-stop shop, like, damage, durability, but now, like, the loss of a haste is a big deal. This isn't a very big deal. We're kind of waffling, but it's not looking good because there's not very much compensation on this item. Death Stance, you're still going to be fine because the core part of the passive is unchanged. Defy healing on takedowns feels bad. Losing ability haste feels bad, but, you know, like, some small compensation, and the item is in a good state anyway, so we'll be okay. Black Cleaver, this item is nuts. It is a ridiculous stat stick, and then it's getting buffed. So if you're capable of building Black Cleaver and would get value from stacking it, please do so. The overall consensus is that there's actually, like, a noticeable class of caster fighters that are probably going to be impacted in power, and you're going to be responsible for playing those champions and just determining to what degree they're impacted, because if you main those champions, like, you probably should still stick with them. Unless it's, like, Aatrox, who's just getting another hit from all of this, right? Generally, in Grievous Wounds, we're going to start seeing us sitting on components a lot more often. Oblivion Orb alone is now the best source of Grievous Wounds. Putrefier is, like, significantly worse on its core users. Morellonomicon has some pen, but don't get fooled by this. It's not an item that plays on curve. You would just get some supplementary pen when you eventually finish it, not early into the game. Executioner's Calling, same deal. Chainsword, as a stat stick, is just worse again, and don't build it for the sake of stat sticking when Black Cleaver's in the game. Mortal Reminder is actually a compelling option on, like, 3rd, 4th item now, for 80 carries who would have to do this, because it's just received armor penetration and is now an actual competitor to Lord Doms. It is lower damage, but I would assume you can actually find situations in which this is an option. And Senna swaps some Chainsword to Mortal Reminder. Lord Dom's getting a buff that it doesn't really need. Bramble Vest, starting to actually do something again a little bit. We'll kind of see how impactful that is. Maybe Tavai's Bramble becomes, like, another threatening Russian lane phase, but, you know, it's not a very big increase overall, so Thornmail is just getting much, much better at answering auto attackers too. Like, Thornmail's damage keeps getting buffed, and it's already quite strong, right? That being said, you can't apply Grievous on immobilizing enemies anymore. You will not get Grievous value unless they hit you, which is kind of a big deal, right? For 80 carries, yes, earlier Infinity Edge, earlier Quick Blades has a big potential to be power impacting. The expectation is that champions who just scale off raw AD are going to be stronger than like the raw auto attackers. Auto attackers probably end up with a Mythic Zeal IE curve, which feels kind of comfortable, kind of reminiscent of Season 6. We'll see how that is. Bloodthirster is a little harder to buy early. You wouldn't change your pick conditions for champions and say, oh, I don't need Peel, I have Bloodthirster later, because you still should only really be getting this on third or your damage suffers a lot, but it's way better in anti-engage and like actual push forward engage scenarios. Like, it's better as a shield, right? We did not really assess any of these mana changes because like it's so much little minutia that we're really going to have to feel it out. And an overheal buff did not ship that was supposed to, so I'm not really sure that these champions fall off presence of mind. Worth noting is that Ezreal's gaining quite a lot. There's some mana cost changes on Jhin. Jinx having more is always a little bit threatening, but ultimately, like, that's kind of it. Blade of the Ruined King, if we assessed Lilia's DPS increase to be high, then this is similar, and so we would assess Blade's DPS increase to be high. The 50 damage decrease on Siphon doesn't matter at the stage of the game where it actually applies. Cooldown can be a little impactful for fighters, but ultimately, I don't think this is creating more pick conditions for 80 carry users. It's just the people who already had it as an option are happier and like a little bit stronger and have some DPS increase. Demonic Embrace, like it almost is 1% max health decrease for melees over the course of its burn, but ultimately that's kind of a negligible DPS nerf and should be fine on its core users. Plus, it's kind of a negligible DPS buff for ranged users, but it does create the opportunity for some extra Rod of Ages users who would ordinarily feel bad about skipping Leandries. Essence Reaver, I'm having a hard time predicting its curve, but 10 AD, it's only really good on the champions who can like rush it, because I think there's like too many compelling options competing with it for third, fourth, like that sort of thing. That said, like, I don't know, the idea I came up with was Neela third item against like a lot of squishies. You would have to have like a really compelling reason to not build attack speed or like armor pen or something like that, so I'm not sold on this Essence Reaver buff. But overall, that's the patch. A lot of big systemic changes that will impact champion power level, and for the sake of amateur play, that means assessing your own pools to just make sure that you can still play them. Like, most of the champions that you will be playing already, you can probably still pilot, and you're just going to need to adapt to it, and I would not recommend going for, like, crazy pool shakeups off this. It's more so, like, is there something here that you used to play that is now noticeably better by, like, noticeably improved by 80 carry changes, noticeably improved by, like, cleaver, noticeably improved by direct changes here? It's more stuff like that, because, like, barring a couple of fighters, I don't think anything got nerfed to oblivion, and barring Yuumi, like, Yuumi has to leave your pool. But ultimately, yeah, I think that will be the expected impact on amateur play. How am I going to cut 2 hours down into like a 40-minute video? Lucian conversation was 20 minutes. That could have been 2. Yeah, that one gets cut down a lot. That one gets cut down a lot. There's a lot of, like, long things that we got stuck on that get completely cut. I'm reading my mid laner's opinion on Zoe, and I think he's just wrong. He seems to think, like, the entire lane phase for Zoe is, like, based on her item drops. And historically, that's not true. I mean, to my knowledge, Zoe is just struggling to trade into most things and then gets out wave cleared now. We'll find out. I'll be right back. I'm using the washroom. Okay. Hello, friends. What are we doing? Do we have any other things we need to talk about last minute? Solo queue stream. That fucks my routine a lot. I have a lot of stuff to do. I have to... Look, okay, guys, I know you want a solo queue stream, but I have to get over some mental blocks. I really have to, okay? And I'm close, but I'm not quite there yet. And I know I have to play solo queue, but... How's my day going? My day's good. I mean, this has been my day so far. I woke up, like, a few hours ago. I woke up a little late. I'm supposed to wake up at 8:30 now. I got up at, like, 9:30, 10. I sat down. I reviewed my IOGS predictors that helped me to do this. And then I just sat down and did the patch notes. What I have to do later is I have to edit this into a video, and I have to do my first look at, like, the Aurelian Soul stuff so I can make some behind-the-scenes content for Day 1 ASOL. And PvE is still not getting deployed, right? Like, we're still not gaining access to PvE today, right? What happened with that exactly? Well, to my knowledge, Riot Games suffered a cybersecurity attack that impacted their ability to ship content. Right. Which means there is a shorter turnaround time for Day 1 ASOL, which is scary. It means my life is going to get a little bit harder. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything about PBE on Twitter. That sucks. I was just checking. But not here. Not here. Okay. Yeah, I promise solo queue stuff is coming eventually, guys. I'm too mental blocked. I will get there. I'm close. So. Because we've had some success in the last 2. I just need to find a way to make it frequent, consistent, like actual practice, you know? Especially since I have to develop some picks. Okay. Oh, that was a big crunch. Oh. Well, in that case, guys, if we have nothing more that we need to talk about, like, urgently about the patch, I guess we're done here. I guess I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna, like, get myself some lunch, and I'm gonna, I would have been online later tonight for the in-house. I'll keep an eye out for it, but I think it becomes likely that I just don't stream tonight then. So I can get some work done so I can make it easier to handle day one ASOL when it's time to do that. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for being here, guys. Don't forget to live yourselves, respect each other. I will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.